Human nature is pretty much universal. Women love their babies. Men and women attach to each other surrounding parenthood. Men have a desire and ability to protect the people that they love, to use their strength and power to protect the people they love and to protect the weak and the innocent, even if they don't know them, like those three chaps rushing in to help that guy who's being beat up. They didn't necessarily know the guy, but this is what a good man does. And these things are universally true, no matter what your language, no matter where you live, and no matter what era of human history we're in. Those things don't change, and that's why we need to keep focused on those unchangeable realities.
Jennifer Roback Morse, such a joy to talk to you again. It really is a joy. You, of course, founder and president of the wonderful Ruth Institute in the US that does some marvelous research, kind of research that nobody else does. And you say a lot of the stuff that nobody else will say. You were talking back in January about real marriage and how it delivers stuff that nothing else can. Maybe we'll touch on that. But the reason I wanted to talk to you today, Father's Day is approaching. Interestingly enough, in the US and the UK, we both have Father's Day at the same time. Mother's Day, we vary. I don't know why that is. But there you go. But Father's Day is approaching. And you've said actually for June, we shouldn't be celebrating Pride Month. We should be celebrating masculinity. And you've given a lot of facts and figures around that. So I just thought I'd talk to you for a minute about why you've said that and why you're doing that.
Well, Tony, I don't know what's going on across the pond, but over here in the US, Pride Month has kind of been fizzling for the last few years. There was a time when we at the Ruth Institute actually could raise a lot of money during June because we would just say, we resist pride, send money. And people would send money because pride was in their face all the time. They would see the pride flag at their city hall. They would see pride flags in churches and on the cereal boxes, and they go down the aisles of the supermarkets and all the sports teams and everything. So people were really fed up with it, and we would just say we're against that. And it was like they were doing all our advertising for us. People would send money. But the last few years, that has not been the case. And of course, we're glad. We're glad that they're not in your face in the same way, and that corporate America is not putting millions of dollars into promoting it, which they had been. So we're very happy and grateful about that. And so we ask ourselves, well, Pride, June as Pride Month is still kind of lingering in people's minds. What can we do? How can we leverage that in some constructive way? Last year, you might remember, Tony, I don't know if you remember this, but we were very mischievous. We said it was Ex-Gay Visibility Day is what we
Interesting.
declared.
Yeah,
We,
yeah,
we,
yeah.
we talked about people who've left Pride behind. That's how we spent June last year. And this year we decided, you know what, let's dig it in even deeper, and talk about what does it mean to be a man? Why do we need men? All of the people who have been saying masculinity is somehow intrinsically toxic, those people need to be shouted down, basically. And I tell you, it's hard shouting them down because there are a lot more of them. That's really deeply entrenched over here. And I suppose it is over there as well. So we think it's worthwhile to say men are good, we need men, and that what it means to be a good man is to use your power and your strength and your authority for the benefit of the weak and the poor and the helpless and the people who need you and the innocent. And so we think that needs to be said. We think that would solve a lot of problems if men rose to that occasion and women endorsed them and supported them and thanked them, ladies, thank them when they put their bodies between you and trouble. Be grateful. We feel like that it's time to say that. It's been time to say that for a long time, Tony, and so that's what we're about here at the Ruth Institute.
Great. And nobody wants toxic masculinity. And yes, it does exist, but actually, we desperately need masculinity, good masculinity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have this incident in Northern Ireland this past week of the Sudanese refugee, migrant, whatever you want to call him, a Sudanese man, attacking a disabled white native man. And that's as toxic as masculinity gets right there. That's toxic. But then men rush in to solve it. Three guys rush in, one of them with a hockey stick. I guess it has a hurling stick, I guess is what they call it in Ireland. But a guy with a stick and two of his buddies go in there and and put a stop to it. And then the police come. And so violence takes place there. First there's unjustified toxic violence, and then there's necessary unavoidable violence. Violence stops violence. It's not true that violence never solves anything. The violence of the good men solved the problem of the violence of the bad men. And I think that needs to be said too. And I'm grateful to those fellows and what they did.
And we don't live in a perfect world where violence is unnecessary, do we? And that's the thing. And probably now you mentioned what it's like over the pond. Well, you're more likely statistically to have a smartphone as a boy than a father in your home, right? Which is really interesting according to one of our recent reports. And just like in the US, boys are trailing girls all the way through the education system. And you've written about this. And so the idea of fathers being around being a good thing, and we have lots and lots of reports being published about male role models, but nobody will mention or encourage dads being around. That seems to be the unspoken solution. We want more male teachers, we want more male role models, but let's not say dads.
Dad, yeah, right. Let's not say that. Which because when you say dad, you're saying that mom and dad have to be collaborating. And in our I can say this to you because we're fellow Anglophones, right? Part of the the worst part, or the one of the negative parts of the Anglosphere, you could say, is our massive reliance on individualism. There's a place for individualism, but when it breaks down mother and father and says the household is nothing but a collection of individuals, now you got a problem. That's a real problem. And I think it's a well, I don't want to say a misreading or a misappropriation, but guys like John Stuart Mill and Adam Smith made you think that was possible. Although I don't think they thought that, but that's what we've done with it a couple of hundred years on, throughout the English speaking world. We think, oh, that's individualism. Oh, yeah, independence, autonomy. Oh, yay, yay. But no, we've gone way too far with that. There's a proper Christian understanding of independence and autonomy, right? But it does not go all the way down to the baby is an independent actor at 6 weeks old when you send them to daycare. That's just not the way it works. And so that's why dad, that's what we can't say. We need male role models, but we don't want to say dad because that impinges on the right of the woman to be independent. And that is, we've really lost our way if we think like that, because I will say as a woman that one of the joys of my life as a woman is found in my relations with others. And there's a certain kind of feminism, which we can say is toxic feminism, which tells me that my happiness is found in self-assertion and self-assertion only, right? And having too much regard for other people I'm going to turn into a doormat. No, that if we poison our relations between men and women, if we view our children as a hindrance to our happiness, those views will not make us as women happy. It's not possible for a woman to be happy with those views.
Yeah, and you also so you mentioned the kind of feminine aspect of things, and we have an idea of toxic empathy as well, which is another big thing, which is the feelings led anything goes as long as somebody wants it or feels it, which is perhaps less of a male trait, more of a female trait, but can be just as toxic in society. But I'm just wondering, we have a cohabitation review just started in the UK whereby the government wants to give similar rights to cohabiting couples that married couples have on, say, the death or the departure of a partner or something else like that. I'm just wondering what your views on that are, because our views are, well, it's instead of encouraging people to do the right thing, which is to get married because that's the thing that's associated with the commitment, with the father staying around, we're saying, well, the government will retrospectively apply marital rights to assets, etc., for people who are just cohabiting. Do you have that in the US?
Probably built into some of our programs, we have something like that. And certainly there is a doctrine of common law, which says if you've been together long enough, it counts as a common law marriage. And so, but that has to be adjudicated. That
Mm.
doesn't automatically come on you. I think is the way that works. But of course, Tony, I agree with the position that you and your organization are taking, that cohabitation is not a substitute for marriage at all. That's
Mm.
been proven a long time ago. And
Mm.
and I just want to say, since we started this conversation with pride and gay marriage and all that, when my first book was called Love and Economics, I just happen to have a copy of it here, and I wrote it in 2001. And this book was about how kids need their parents and about how parents need to get married. And the things I was concerned about in this book were divorce, unmarried parenthood, and too much daycare. That's what I was worried about in 2001. And at that time, there were several books that were coming out about fatherlessness. There was a book by David Popenoe. There was a book by uh, David Blankenhorn. People were starting to get the idea that maybe this fatherless thing is a problem and we need to address it. And then you know what happened, Tony? Gay marriage. Gay marriage became an issue that we all had to talk about and all had to debate and all had to somehow make our positions, take a position with respect to that. And gay marriage took up all the air in the room. It took up all of the space where that debate should have been happening and replaced it
Interesting.
with a radical, an even more radical view. Not only is cohabitation okay, not only kids don't really need married parents, it doesn't matter at all, the identity of the parents, and whether they're related to you doesn't matter. And whether it's a man or whether it's a woman, what it means to be a father, what it means to be a mother. Now we have the weight of the state and all public opinion saying, nah, kids don't really need their dads. Nah, kids don't really need their moms when it gets right down to it. This kind of stuff, which in the absence of gay marriage, no one would have said that. Yeah, nobody would have thought to say such a thing if it weren't for that. So I think we have to acknowledge that the campaign for gay marriage was itself destructive because it convinced the public for gay marriage to succeed, it had to convince the public of things that are factually incorrect. And we're still living with that.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and this is one of the problems that people either didn't perceive at the time, but I think are growing to realize now that with marriage comes the expectation of parenthood, but of course with same-sex couples you can't become parents, so another mechanism then has to be formed, and that mechanism, of course, often intentionally creates children with the view to separate them from their biological mother or father. The idea of mother or father becomes irrelevant. It has to become irrelevant.
Right.
Children become chattels, they become allocated by the state in accordance with whatever, instead of the kind of biological right. And in fact, we've got a law going through our parliament right now, which for the first time in history is rewriting that assumption around the fact that a child's best interests are to be raised by its biological mother and father, and saying that actually, no, parenthood is a privilege, not a right. And that privilege can therefore be allocated by the state. So, and all of that is downstream of the idea that, well, yes, of course, if two same-sex people can marry, then two same-sex people can have a family, which means that mother, father, children, rights, ownership, biological means nothing anymore.
Right. And we predicted that, as
Mm.
we have a pamphlet that we created back in the day, and I'll send it to you, Tony, and you
Mm.
can your people can come and
If it's
download it. I'll
online,
send
we'll
you a link
link to
where
it as
y'all
well,
can
actually.
download it. We called it we called it 77 non-religious reasons to support man-woman marriage. And
Yeah.
we tens of thousands of copies of this pamphlet were given out at the different states when there were state level debates
Yeah.
and
Mm.
legislation taking place around this issue. And we predicted that what would happen if you redefine marriage, you will redefine parenthood. There's
Mm.
no getting around that. And what instead of parenthood being a biological reality that the state simply records, now parenthood will become whatever the state says it is. And this is a massive transfer of power from civil society to uh, to the state. And I don't know why libertarians can't see the problem with this. You know, you're just sitting on your hands saying, well, the grown-ups are more free, so what's the problem? You're not really more free. The state is saying, and also, Tony, we recorded cases where um, women in a same-sex relationship would have a baby and then all of a sudden decide, gee, sharing the care of my baby with another woman is not as easy as I thought it was going to be, even though I thought I loved her and yada yada yada. You know, women don't necessarily like to share the care of their baby with another woman. And so when these relationships would break up, they would end up in court, right? And increasingly and pretty consistently, the court would assign parental rights to the non-parent woman against the wishes of the biological mother, which means it's not that everybody is more free, because that biological mom is a whole lot less free than any mom would have been under the old regime. Under the old regime, you can't make a woman give her baby to somebody who's not related. You could never, there would be, you would have to prove she was manifestly unfit before you could make that happen. And so the idea that all of a sudden we're now more free because we have gay marriage, that doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, in fact, it goes further than that because planned surrogacy laws actually will mandate a woman giving away her biological offspring if she's agreed to do so. So she no longer has a right to her child. So you're exactly right. So the corollary is that gay marriage, so called, directly leads to everyone being a ward of the state to be allocated just like slaves as the state feels free to do so. And who'd have thought? But and arguing that backwards actually gets back to, well, we can't have gay marriage in that case, and that it's a separate conversation. Let me say straight away, if you live in a liberal democracy, that same-sex attracted people might want to have the same rights as married people, that's a whole other conversation. But marriage is the term which describes what only a man and a woman can do in their biological family, and and it's like square and triangle. Saying a square has got four sides is not triangle phobic. We need descriptions for different things, otherwise everything breaks down. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Do you know what, Tony? I can't forbear from saying there was a Canadian chap back in the day, because Canada went down this path earlier than we did. Canadian chap called Douglas Farrow, who wrote a book called A Nation of Bastards. And it was on exactly the point that you just raised, that the legitimacy of your relation comes from the state and not from the marital relations. And so he was forecasting. Very clear thinking guy, and he saw what you just described there.
Yeah, and it's literally happening around us.
Yes,
Literally, it's
yes,
happening around us.
yes,
And it's not fiction, and it's not some kind of conspiracy theory. The laws are literally moving in that direction. The Law
that's right.
Society is recommending these. It's literally going in that direction. But I'm very conscious in the last few minutes that we've got together. I know you're really busy, and I'm so grateful for your time. But where is there hope? I know that the stats are changing in the US. Opinions towards approval of same-sex marriage, not same-sex attraction, it's a whole other conversation, but same-sex marriage opinion is falling. Yep. So, and that's really interesting because the views among young people towards abortion, for example, changed radically in the US over the last 20 years, primarily because pro-lifers have more kids, right? But so I'm wondering, why is it changing in the US? Is it going to carry on changing, do you think? And where is the hope?
Well, it is true that support for same-sex marriage, the Obergefell decision, however you want to describe it, because it's not a marriage. It's very important that we say that there's no such thing as a same-sex marriage. That's a misuse of terminology. Tony, I think there are a number of reasons why support has fallen. First of all, the fall is most dramatic among people who are registered Republicans, and those who are registered Democrats are hanging on. It's also dramatic among younger people. You're seeing young people saying, "Nah, we don't want this." They're not buying it. They're not buying what the state is selling anymore. And I think there are a number of things that go into it. There's no question Donald Trump and everything he represents is part of the package. exactly how to parse that out. I don't, God alone knows, I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
because that's a complicated
It is
ball of
very
wax. It
complicated.
means a
Yeah,
lot of things to
yeah.
different people. Um, but since he's been president, he has pushed back very firmly against transgenderism and the way in which the United States federal government has been supporting and propping up transgenderism. So, very, very first day of his presidency, he made an executive order, and his staff has been talking about it and working on it steadily. And a lot of people knew that transgenderism was a problem. There are plenty of people in the US, including people who self-identify as gay or lesbian, who just totally draw the line at transgenderism. They feel like it's a complete, they don't like it. They feel it's a sellout for them. I would implore them to reconsider their support for for the redefinition of marriage, because those things are linked. I don't think there's any doubt they're causally linked in the public mind and in law and all the rest of it. But there are plenty of gays and lesbians who are opposed to transgenderism, and they're very vocal, and they're pretty effective, actually. Another aspect of the transgender issue that I don't think people didn't realize is just how aggressive the government has been in taking the rights of parents to direct
Mm,
the
mm,
upbringing of their children. In the US, there are several states where a parent can lose custody of their child simply for refusing to affirm the child's chosen identity. And,
yeah.
when you're talking about a teenager deciding this is my true self, every sensible person should have reason to be skeptical about how permanent such a thing is going to be. And the idea that the state and the agents of the state would step between a parent and child in
Mm,
that kind of arena, there are a lot of people, including people who were at one time very liberal, very democratic leaning.
mm,
Many of
mm.
those people are like, what in the world is going on here?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
have jumped ship. So that's another aspect that people didn't see coming
Yeah.
in 2015 when the court redefined marriage, but now
Mm,
it's just plain as day. And so the fact that the let's just call it the sexual revolutionary ruling class took that step way, way too far into transgenderism, that is causing a lot of people to reconsider their views about other matters, including like, what the heck did we just do with marriage? And why did we do it? Was this really worth it? That type of thing, that type of self-examination, I think is a part of what's at the base of this. And people can see around them, it's not that there are that many people getting married in same-sex marriages. There aren't that many. It's not like it's changing people's lives in that respect. And we have data to show, Tony, that the mental health of sexual minorities is not improving.
mm,
We were told, gay people will feel better. Gay people are they're psychologically fragile and vulnerable, and they're being oppressed, and we owe this to them, and they're going to feel better. And the data are in. There is literally, I'm not aware of a single scrap of evidence that supports that view, and some evidence that says they're in worse shape. It hasn't improved at all. So, and you and I are not completely surprised by that, because there is a problem, but further affirmation of gay identity is not the solution to the problem, and so therefore you don't see the good results that people were expecting. So in my mind, Tony, all of those things are contributing factors to the overall picture of people being less supportive of redefining marriage, less supportive of the gay rights movement overall, less willing to say, "Oh, they want it, so it must be okay." Yeah, they're going to have to work harder for every move. People are that kind of goodwill, I think, is not nearly as widespread as it was in say 2014 or something like that.
yeah. And that's absolutely right. And I think the problem is that the temptation of the state is to grab ever more power and ever more control. And I don't think they really care about these people at all and their needs and their minority rights. It's more a weapon and a tool to grab yet more and more power and control people. And I think people are waking up to that. The big thing is around the marriage thing. And
Right.
actually, although the numbers are tiny, the principle that allows the numbers affects the entire population, every child in society, every
Exactly.
biological connection. And those are the things which actually give the state way more power over people than the state really should have at all. And that's what we should be careful. And the only way to unravel it is to unravel it, and go back and say, well, yeah, that doesn't count because actually biology matters. And yes, you could have rights and those things are over there, but actually the biological connection, which is represented by marriage, it's the thing that's more likely to keep people together. And that's why it's there. And that's why it's recognized. We need to get back to that for the sake of fertility, for the sake of our society, the future generations, the best version of those next generations. It's something we need to get back to. You seem to be heading gently, slowly, the winds are blowing towards that direction in the US. I'm not sure that's yet the case in the UK.
Well, we certainly wish you well and are praying for you. We know you guys have your problems over there. We have our problems over here. But human nature is not as malleable and plastic as people think it is. Human nature is pretty much universal. Women love their babies. Men and women attach to each other surrounding parenthood. Men have a desire and ability to protect the people that they love, to use their strength and power to protect the people they love and to protect the weak and the innocent, even if they don't know them, like those three chaps rushing in to help that guy who's being beat up. They didn't necessarily know the guy, but this is what a good man does. And these things are universally true, no matter what your language, no matter where you live, and no matter what era of human history we're in. Those things don't change. And that's why we need to keep focused on those unchangeable realities.
Great. Jennifer Roback Morse, this Father's Day, let's celebrate fathers. This month, let's celebrate good masculinity and keep up the fantastic work. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thanks, Tony. Bye.